The night was dark and cold. Rain fell slowly from the black sky, touching the empty streets with a sad sound. A street light flickered again and again, showing the shadow of a man walking alone. His name was Arman Singh. He wore an old brown jacket, wet from the rain. His hair was gray, his face tired, but his eyes were deep, full of quiet pain. He carried a small bag in his hand and walked slowly toward his small house at the end of the street. Suddenly, a loud siren broke the silence. Blue and red lights flashed behind him. Police cars stopped quickly. Doors opened and officers ran toward him, shouting, "Hands up! Don't move!" Arman turned slowly. He didn't run. He didn't speak. He just looked at them with calm eyes, as if he already knew this was coming. The rain became heavier. People started opening their windows. Some came out with umbrellas. Everyone was whispering, "What's happening? Who is that man? Did he do something wrong?" No one really knew him well. They only knew he lived alone, fixed broken things for others, and helped poor children study. But tonight he looked like a criminal. One of the officers stepped forward. He was young and angry. "You're under arrest, Arman Singh. You have the right to remain silent." Arman didn't resist. He looked at the ground and said softly, "I understand." As the officer placed cold handcuffs on his wrists, Arman looked up at the sky. The rain washed his face, but his eyes stayed steady, strong yet full of sadness. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Wait. That name, Arman Singh, wasn't he in the army once?" The young officer froze for a second. Yes, he had heard that name before. Years ago, the newspapers called Captain Arman Singh a national hero. He had saved lives in a dangerous mission. Then suddenly he disappeared from the news and from the world. The officer shook his head and pushed him toward the car. "Move!" The metal of the handcuffs made a sharp sound. Each click echoed in the silent street. A small boy, maybe 10 years old, stood near a tree watching. He shouted, "Uncle Arman! You didn't do anything. Tell them!" Arman turned his head slightly and gave the boy a small smile. "Go home, Ravi. Everything will be fine." The boy's eyes filled with tears. He didn't understand why his kind, quiet neighbor was being taken away like a criminal. The police car door closed. Inside, Arman sat quietly, watching the rain slide down the glass. His reflection in the window looked like a stranger. He whispered to himself, "Maybe this is how fate works. Maybe this is what I deserve." The car started moving. The officer sitting beside him looked uncomfortable. He finally asked, Captain, why didn't you run?" Arman smiled faintly. A soldier never runs from his duty, even if the world thinks he's guilty. The officer didn't reply. Something about that answer felt heavy, like there was a hidden story behind it. Back in the neighborhood, people kept talking. "What did he do?" "They say he stole something from the town office." No, I heard it's something worse." Rumors began to spread like smoke. But no one knew the truth. No one knew the pain that man had carried for years. Inside the police station, the air was cold and filled with the smell of old files. Arman was made to sit on a wooden chair. A senior officer walked in, his face strict. "So, Captain Arman Singh, after all these years we finally meet." Arman looked up calmly. "I didn't think anyone remembered me." "Oh, we remember," the officer said. "We remember the man who lost everything because of one wrong decision." Arman said nothing. He looked at the wall where a clock ticked slowly. Each second felt like a drop of memory falling back into his mind. The war, the noise, the screams, the faces of men he couldn't save. The officer threw a file on the table. "We have evidence. You were found near the warehouse last night. The stolen documents were hidden close to your home." Arman replied quietly. "Sometimes what looks true isn't real." The officer frowned. "You're still talking in riddles, Captain. Maybe you think your old medal will save you?" Arman gave a tired smile. "A medal can shine for a moment, but it can't clean the truth." That night he was locked in a small cell. The walls were cracked, the light was dim. He sat on the cold floor, his hands still shaking slightly from the cold. From the window, the moonlight touched his face gently. He closed his eyes and remembered the day he was called a hero, the day the whole country cheered for him, the day he wore his uniform with pride. And now the same hands that once saluted the flag were tied with handcuffs. He whispered again, "I did what I had to do." The guard outside heard him and laughed. Yeah, sure. That's what they all say, but the truth was something else. Something no one in that police station could ever imagine. A truth buried deep in the dust of forgotten battles. Back in town, the little boy Ravi was still awake. He sat by the window waiting to see if Arman would come back. His mother told him, "Sleep, Ravi. That man, he's not who you think he is," but Ravi shook his head. "No, Mama, he's good. He fixed my bicycle. He gave me books. Heroes don't hurt people," the mother sighed. "Sometimes heroes fall too, son." Ravi looked out again at the empty street where rain still fell. He whispered, "Then I'll wait. Because maybe heroes come back too." Far away inside his cell, Arman opened his eyes. He felt the same strange peace he always felt before something big happened. He knew this was not the end. This was just the beginning. The world might see him as a criminal tonight. But soon, the truth would rise again. The camera slowly zooms in on his face as his whisper fades in the dark. "They can arrest my body, but not my story." The story of Captain Arman Singh did not begin in that dark jail cell. Years before the handcuffs, before the rain, before the silence, he was the man every child wanted to be like. He was the face of courage. Arman joined the army when he was just 20. He wasn't the loudest man in the camp, nor the strongest, but he had something that made him different. Heart. He believed being a soldier was not about fighting. It was about protecting people who could not fight for themselves. The hero is born. His journey to glory began during a rescue mission in the border mountains. It was winter, snow everywhere, wind like knives. A group of soldiers was trapped after a massive explosion. Communication was lost. Everyone thought they were gone, but Arman refused to give up. He looked at his commander and said, "Sir, if they're alive, they'll wait for someone to come. I have to go." His commander warned him, "It's suicide, Arman. You won't survive that storm." Arman simply smiled. "Then let me die trying." He and a small rescue team went into the storm. For 3 days, no one heard from them. When they finally came back, Arman carried 2 injured soldiers on his shoulders and walked with frostbitten hands, still holding the national flag. The video of that moment went viral. The media called him the Lion of the Mountains. Children drew his picture in schools. The government gave him a Medal of Honor. His name became a symbol of bravery. But glory sometimes is the first step toward pain. The secret mission a year later, Arman was chosen for a secret mission, something no one was allowed to talk about. The mission's goal was to rescue a group of scientists who were captured near a border area by an enemy group. Arman was made team leader. He trained day and night, studying every path, every risk. He promised his men, "We go in together, we come out together." No one left behind. The mission began at night. The team crossed the dark valley, moving like shadows under the cold moonlight. Everything was going well, until something went wrong. A radio signal was traced. Their location was leaked. Suddenly, boom! An explosion shook the ground. Fire lit the sky. Screams echoed in the darkness. When Arman opened his eyes, the mission site was burning. Half his team was gone. The scientists they came to save were dead. He crawled through the smoke, searching for survivors. He found only 3. They were bleeding, terrified, broken. One of them said weakly, "Sir, someone betrayed us." Arman froze. "Who? How? Why?" There was no time to think. Enemy soldiers were closing in. He made a decision no one else would have made. He ordered the remaining men to escape through a hidden tunnel. He stayed behind to create a distraction. He fired until his bullets were gone. Then he ran through fire to destroy the remaining enemy weapons so that his men could survive. When reinforcements finally arrived, Arman was lying on the ground, half conscious, his uniform burned, his hand still clutching the flag patch on his shoulder. The blame. He woke up in a hospital 2 weeks later. His first question was, "Are my men safe?" The nurse nodded. "They're alive because of you." But when he smiled with relief, the nurse's face changed. "I'm sorry, sir, but the government says the mission failed." Arman didn't understand. "Failed? We did what we could." "I followed the plan," she whispered. "They said you leaked the location." The words hit him harder than any bullet. "What? That's impossible." Soon officers came. They took his statement coldly, without emotion. They didn't listen when he said someone from inside the base betrayed the team. They didn't check the radio logs. They just wanted a name and a reason, and when they couldn't find one, they gave them his. The media stormed within days. The news channels were full of noise. Hero or traitor? Captain Arman Singh under investigation. The same people who once cheered his name now questioned his loyalty. His house was surrounded by reporters. Microphones were pushed into his face. Captain, did you sell national secrets? Were you working for the enemy? He wanted to shout, to explain, but his voice broke every time. The people who had once called him a savior now called him a disgrace. The medal that once shined on his chest was taken away from him in silence. His mother cried every night. His friends stopped visiting. And Arman, he just sat alone staring at the flag folded in his lap. He whispered, I did everything right, so why does it feel so wrong? The fall months later, the investigation ended. The report said, mission failed due to poor leadership and security breach under Captain Arman Singh. No proof. No hearing. No justice. Just a few typed words that destroyed his life. He was dismissed from service. No uniform, no honor, no salute. He packed his few belongings into a small bag and walked away from the military base for the last time. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. The once proud captain became just a name people whispered about. He left the city, moved to a quiet town, and tried to live like a normal man. He fixed machines, helped children study, and kept his medals hidden in a box. But every night, when he closed his eyes, he saw the same fire, the same screams, the same explosion that changed his life forever. He often thought, if I speak, no one will listen. If I stay silent, they will think I'm guilty, so maybe silence is my punishment. The return of the past years passed quietly. He grew older, calmer, quieter. The town people only knew him as Uncle Arman. No one asked about his past, and he never told them. But life has a strange way of reopening old wounds. One night, something from that old mission came back, something dangerous, hidden, and connected to the people who had betrayed him. And when that secret reached his small town, the police came for him again. The man once called a hero was handcuffed like a criminal. The same story, but this time he decided not to fight it, because he knew. The truth always returns, no matter how deeply it's buried. As he sat in that dark jail cell again, the sound of the past echoed in his ears, the screams, the betrayal, the fire. He closed his eyes and whispered, if this is the price of doing what's right, I'll pay it again. And in that moment you could see it clearly. He wasn't broken. He was waiting. Waiting for the day the world would finally see what really happened on that mountain. Years passed like slow rain. The world forgot Captain Arman Singh, the hero, the soldier, the man once known for his courage. But Arman never forgot the world. He lived quietly in a small town far from the noise of the city. A little house at the edge of the road, a tiny garden, and a workshop where he fixed old machines, radios, and bicycles. Every morning, he would sit outside with a cup of tea, watching the children walk to school. Some would wave, shouting, "Good morning, Uncle Arman." He would smile back, a small, tired smile. He liked helping them with homework, teaching them stories about courage, but he never told them that those stories were his own. A quiet life. The people of the town respected him. He was kind, humble, and never spoke much. No one knew about his past. To them, he was just an old mechanic who lived alone. Every evening, after work, he went to the local tea shop where he sat in silence, listening to others talk about politics, cricket, and weather. Sometimes he smiled when people praised the army. He would whisper softly, "They're the real heroes." The shopkeeper, Ramesh, often asked, "Uncle, you speak like you were a soldier once." Arman would just reply, "Once upon a time." And then he'd change the topic. He didn't want sympathy. He didn't want fame. He just wanted peace. But peace sometimes doesn't stay for long. The mysterious stranger. One evening, as Arman was closing his workshop, a black car stopped outside. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a coat, dark glasses, even though the sun had set. He looked around and said, "Captain Arman Singh?" Arman froze for a second. No one had called him captain for years. "You must be mistaken," he said quietly. The man smiled coldly. "Oh, I never make mistakes. You're the one from Mission Dawn, right?" Hearing those words, Mission Dawn. Arman's heart stopped for a moment. It was the secret mission that destroyed his life. No one in this town should know about it. What do you want? Armand asked. The man stepped closer.
Something you have.
Something from that mission, Armand frowned. I don't have anything, the man chuckled. Oh, you will remember soon. But if you don't, we'll make you remember. Before Armand could reply, the man got back into his car and drove away. The old soldier stood there, the cold wind touching his face, his mind full of old ghosts. Mission Dawn, he whispered. Why now? The warning that night he couldn't sleep. He opened the old wooden box under his bed. Inside were his medals, letters, and a burned photo of his old team. He touched the picture softly. 5 faces smiling, only 2 of them still alive. He looked at the back of the photo. There were some words written in faded ink. Truth always returns. He sat in silence for hours, thinking about the man in the black coat. Something inside him said this was not over. Someone was still hiding the truth. He decided to stay alert. But destiny was already moving faster than him. The setup, a few weeks later, the town woke up to shocking news. Important government documents had gone missing from the local office. No signs of break-in, no fingerprints, no suspects, but the documents were found later, hidden in a small wooden box. Behind Armand Singh's workshop, the police arrived in the morning. Sirens again. People gathered again. What's happening? They say Uncle Armand stole something. No way, he's such a good man. Armand came out quietly, wiping oil from his hands. He looked at the officers and said calmly, there must be some mistake. But they didn't listen. They opened the box, and inside were the missing papers, stamped and signed by the government. One officer said sharply, "You are under arrest, Mr. Armand Singh." For a moment, the world stood still. The people of the town looked shocked. Children cried. The boy Ravi shouted, "He didn't do anything. You're lying." But the officers dragged him away. Again, the cold steel touched his wrists. Again, the rain began to fall, and again, the man who once saved lives was called a criminal. Inside the cell at the police station, the senior officer looked at him and said, "You never change, do you?" Always in the middle of trouble. Armand stayed silent. He knew shouting was useless. He had been here before. But this time, something felt different. This time, it wasn't just bad luck. It was a plan. Someone wanted him destroyed completely. That night in his cell, he looked at the cracked ceiling and thought, someone planted that box. Someone from my past. He closed his eyes and remembered the man in the black coat. His words echoed again. Something you have. From that mission, Armand understood now. The stolen documents weren't about this small town. They were connected to that old operation, the one that ruined his life. The past wasn't just back. It was hunting him. A new ray of hope. The next morning, a young woman came to the police station. She was a journalist, Meera Sharma. She had heard about the arrest and wanted to know more. The officer told her, "He's an ex-soldier. Failed mission. Now he's stealing documents." Old habits die hard, but Meera wasn't convinced. Something in Armand's eyes didn't match that story. When she met him in the cell, she said softly, "Captain Singh, I've read about you. You were a hero once." Armand looked up, his eyes calm but tired. "Heroes don't exist anymore, miss." "Only stories do," Meera smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time to tell the real story." He studied her face for a long moment and said, "Truth has a cost," she replied. "Then let's pay it." The beginning of truth. That night, when everyone slept, Meera opened her laptop and searched for the old mission reports. She found missing pages, deleted files, and one report signed by an officer named Colonel Mehta, the same man who blamed Armand years ago. The deeper she searched, the darker it became. Money transfers, secret communications. Someone had used Armand as a cover to hide their own crime. And now, after all these years, they were afraid that truth might come out again. Meera whispered to herself, "He's innocent. They ruined his life to protect themselves." The next morning, she visited Armand again. He looked surprised to see her. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. She smiled softly. "Because my father was one of the men you saved in the mountains. He always said you were a hero." Armand's eyes widened. For the first time in years, his heart felt something warm. Hope. He looked at her and said, "Then maybe it's time the truth marches again." Mira nodded. I'll find everything. They can hide lies, but they can't hide justice forever. Armand closed his eyes and whispered, They handcuffed me once for duty. Now they've done it again for silence. But this time, I won't stay silent. And that was the moment when the hero who had once disappeared into the shadows slowly began to rise again. Because even in darkness, a true soldier never forgets his oath, to fight for the truth no matter the cost. The next morning was cold and cloudy. Inside the police station, Armand Singh sat quietly on the small wooden bench. His hands were still tied, but his mind was free and calm, focused, alert. He had faced worse days in war. But this time the war was different. This battle was not on the border. It was between truth and lies. A ray of hope. Mira Sharma, the young journalist, walked in holding her laptop and a notebook. Her eyes were sharp, but her voice was soft. She greeted the officer at the desk. I'm here to interview the prisoner, Captain Armand Singh. The officer laughed. Interview? Miss, that man's story is over. Why waste time? Mira looked straight at him and said, Because sometimes the story people throw away is the one the nation needs to hear. The officer frowned but allowed her to meet him. Inside the small interrogation room, Armand was sitting with his hands on the table. He looked at Mira and smiled faintly. You came back, he said quietly. I told you truth has a cost, Mira replied. I'm ready to pay it. I started digging into your case last night. Armand leaned forward, curious. And what did you find? Mira opened her laptop and turned it toward him. Files, secret payments. Communication between Colonel Mehta and a foreign agent, just before your mission failed. Armand's face hardened. Colonel Mehta? Yes, Mira said. He was the one who led the investigation against you. The same man who said you leaked information. Armand's eyes darkened with anger. Not loud, but deep. He used me as a shield. The hidden past, Mira explained. After the explosion, Mehta destroyed the original mission logs. He made a fake report and blamed you. He took a large payment from an arms company working with the enemy. They wanted the mission to fail. Armand's fist tightened. His memories flashed. The explosion, the screams, his fallen soldiers. I thought it was my fault, he whispered. For years I carried that guilt. And he was behind it all. Mira looked at him sadly. He built his career on your destruction. He's a powerful man now. Promoted, rich, respected. But the truth is still out there, Armand sighed. No one will believe you, Mira. People trust power, not truth. Mira smiled gently. Then we'll make them listen. Sometimes all it takes is one story. The right one. The risk that evening, Mira went home and started writing an article. She wrote about the hero who was betrayed, the soldier who carried false blame and the truth buried under corruption. She attached files, screenshots, and voice recordings. But before she could publish, her laptop screen went black. Then, a message appeared. Stop digging or you'll regret it. Her heart started racing. Someone was watching her. Someone powerful. She quickly turned off her Wi-Fi and looked out of her window. A black car was parked near her house, the same kind of car that had come to Armand's workshop. She whispered, They know. The attack later that night. As Mira left her home, a motorcycle came speeding from behind. Two men in helmets tried to snatch her bag. She fought back, shouting, Leave me! But one of them pushed her hard. She fell, bruised, but managed to hold on to her laptop. When they couldn't grab it, they fled. A few people nearby helped her up. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were fierce. They want to stop the truth, she said. That means I'm getting close. She went straight to the police station. When Armand saw her injuries, he stood up, shocked. Who did this to you? The same people who ruined your life, Mira replied. I think Colonel Mehta knows I found the files. Armand's face grew serious. Then he'll come for me next. The deal. The next day, a man in a clean white uniform entered the police station. He looked confident, proud, and fake. It was Colonel Mehta himself. The officers stood straight and saluted him. Good morning, sir. Mehta walked directly to Armand's cell, smiling coldly. Captain Singh, we meet again. Armand looked at him calmly. Still pretending to be clean? Mehta smirked. Watch your tone, Captain. I can still make you disappear completely, Armand replied quietly. You already did once. What else is left? Mehta leaned closer. Listen carefully. The journalist, Mira Sharma, she's in danger. If she keeps digging, she'll end up like your team did. Armand's jaw tightened. If you touch her, I'll make sure your lies burn with you. Meta laughed. You're still brave, but bravery without power is useless. He turned to leave, whispering, This time no one will save you. The escape plan that night. The police station lost power for a few minutes. When the lights came back on, Mira had disappeared from town. The officers thought she ran away, but Armand knew better. He whispered, They took her. He had to act fast. He might be a prisoner, but he was still a soldier. When the night guard came close to his cell, Armand faked a cough. As the guard opened the door slightly, Armand moved quickly, pushing him back and taking the keys. He didn't hurt the guard. He just locked him inside and ran. Outside, the cold air hit his face. He ran through the dark streets toward the sound of the sea. He knew Mira's kidnappers would hide her near the old docks, a place no one visits anymore. The confrontation. When he reached the docks, he saw 2 black cars parked near a warehouse. He moved quietly, using the shadows to stay hidden. Inside, Mira was tied to a chair. Colonel Meta stood beside her, holding a phone. You should have listened, Meta said. Now you'll disappear like your hero, Captain Singh. Suddenly a voice came from behind. You talk too much, Colonel. Meta turned, shocked. Armand stepped out of the darkness, his eyes burning with the fire he once carried in war. You ruined my life. You killed my men. You called me a traitor, Meta laughed. You can't prove anything. Armand held up a small device and a recorder. You just did. He had recorded everything Meta said. Meta's face turned pale. He tried to grab his gun, but Armand moved faster, disarming him with one clean motion. You forgot one thing, Meta, Armand said quietly. You can kill a soldier, but you can't kill his truth. The reveal by morning, the police arrived. Mira had already sent the recordings and files to national media. Every news channel played the headline, The man they handcuffed was a national hero. The truth revealed. The country erupted in shock. Colonel Meta was arrested. Investigations reopened. Armand's name was cleared after years of silence. But even as the world cheered, Armand stood quietly by the sea, watching the sunrise. Mira came beside him and said softly, The truth is out. You're free now. Armand smiled faintly. Freedom is not just walking out of a cell, Mira. It's walking away from pain, and still having the strength to forgive. Mira looked at him with tears in her eyes. You're still a hero, Captain. Armand shook his head slowly. No. I'm just a man who never stopped believing in what's right. He looked at the horizon and whispered, They handcuffed me, but they couldn't arrest my honor. The truth was finally out. The world now knew that Captain Armand Singh was not a traitor. He was a man betrayed by his own people. For the first time in years, the newspapers that once called him a criminal now called him a hero again. But Armand didn't smile. He knew this fight wasn't over. Because the real enemy was not just one man. It was the system built on lies and greed. The storm. After the calm after Colonel Mehta's arrest, the government promised a full investigation. TV channels played Armand's old footage. The rescue mission, the parades, the medals, the salute, everywhere, people said, We were wrong about him. He's a true hero. Justice finally wins. But behind those smiling headlines, powerful people were trembling. There were others like Mehta, officers, politicians, businessmen, all part of the same network that had sold the country's secrets years ago. And now that Armand's name was clean, their names were in danger. One of them, a man named Minister Rao, sat in his big office watching the news. He turned off the TV angrily. This old soldier is becoming a problem, he said. He should have stayed forgotten. His advisor asked, What should we do, sir? Rao replied coldly, If he wants to play hero again, let's remind him what happens to heroes in real life. The rising voice. Meanwhile, Mira uploaded a full documentary online. It told everything. The betrayal, the lies, the fake reports, the attack at the docks. The video went viral. Millions watched it within hours. People filled the streets holding banners. Justice for Captain Armand Singh. Honor our forgotten hero. Old soldiers came forward to speak. One of them said on camera, Armand took the blame for something he didn't do. He protected his men even when everyone turned against him. The nation was waking up, but not everyone was happy about that. The threat late one night, Armand was sitting alone in his small house. The sound of rain hit the roof softly. He looked at an old photo of his team, those who never came back from that mission. He whispered, "You got your piece, brothers. Now it's time for me to finish what we started." Suddenly there was a knock on the door. He opened it slowly. A letter was lying on the ground. No name, no stamp, just one line written on it. "Heroes die in silence." Armand looked around. No one was there. He knew what this meant. They were warning him to stay quiet. But he was done being silent. He burned the letter in his lamp's flame and whispered, "If they're afraid of truth, then truth is my weapon now." The trap the next day, Mira called him. Her voice was tense. "Captain, please don't go out today. Something feels wrong. My phone's been tracked. My email was hacked." Armand smiled softly through the phone. "Don't worry about me, Mira. A soldier dies only once. Fear dies every day." She tried to argue, but he ended the call. He knew they would come, and he was ready. That evening, a black SUV stopped near his workshop. 3 men in suits got out.
Captain Singh?
One of them asked politely. "Our minister would like to meet you, privately." Armand looked at them calmly. "Tell your minister. I'm not a pawn anymore." The men's polite faces changed. One of them stepped closer, whispering, "Then maybe we'll finish the game for you." But before they could act, camera flashes came from across the street. Reporters appeared out of nowhere. Police cars arrived. It was a trap, but not for Armand. Mira had set it up. She had followed the men secretly and called the police. The officers arrested them on the spot. They found hidden guns and fake IDs in their car. Mira walked toward Armand, smiling. "I told you to stay home, but I guess you like drama." Armand smiled back faintly. Old habits die hard. The truth spreads. The next morning, every news channel showed footage of the failed kidnapping attempt. Headlines flashed. More names linked to corruption network. Exposed. Documents recovered from the car showed direct connections between Minister Rao and Colonel Mehta. The truth was spreading faster than they could hide. People began marching in protest outside government buildings. Students carried Armand's photo, shouting, "He fought for us, now we fight for him." The same officers who once arrested him now saluted him in respect. But Armand wasn't looking for revenge. He told the reporters, "I don't want power. I just want honesty to return to our nation." The meeting a week later, the Prime Minister invited Armand and Mira to the capital. In a grand hall filled with cameras, Armand stood on stage once again, not in uniform, but in truth. The Prime Minister said, "This man was punished for being loyal. Today we correct that mistake." The crowd clapped loudly. Mira smiled with tears in her eyes. As Armand received the honor back, the medal that was once taken from him, he looked at it quietly and said, "This medal belongs not to me, but to every soldier who was forgotten, to every man or woman who spoke truth and was punished for it." The crowd stood in silence, their eyes filled with respect. The real enemy after the ceremony, Mira asked him, "Do you feel it's over now, Captain?" Armand looked thoughtful. "No, Mira. The real enemy never wore a uniform. It lives inside us, in greed, in fear, in silence." She nodded slowly. "Then how do we fight it?" He smiled softly. "By not becoming like them." They walked together outside the hall. A group of children ran up to Armand, holding small flags. "Uncle, you're our hero," one of them said. Armand knelt down and smiled. "No, my little soldiers. A real hero is the one who stands up for truth even when standing alone." The peace that night, Armand sat on a bench near the sea. The wind was calm, the sky clear. For the first time in many years, he felt peace. Not because he won, but because he never gave up. Mira joined him quietly. "The whole nation is talking about you again," she said. He smiled. "Let them talk about truth instead. One day they'll forget my name, but I hope they never forget what it means to stay honest." Mira looked at him and said softly, "You know, your story will inspire generations." Armand chuckled. "Stories don't change the world, Mira. People do." He stood up, saluted the sea, and whispered, "For my brothers who never came home, and for a nation worth fighting for." As the camera zoomed out, the waves crashed behind him. The screen faded slowly to black. A line appeared in white letters. They handcuffed him twice, but they could never chain his spirit. The sun rose gently over the city. For the first time in many years, Captain Armand Singh woke up without fear, without guilt, and without chains. The noise of the sea outside his window felt peaceful now, like the sound of freedom itself. He stood there for a moment, watching the sunrise. His heart was calm, but his mind was full of memories. Memories of his soldiers, his lost friends, and the long road that had brought him here. He whispered softly, "It's over, but it will never be forgotten." A nation that finally remembered. In every corner of the country, people were still talking about Armand Singh. Children were learning his story in schools. TV shows were made about his bravery, and soldiers across the borders saluted his name again. The government announced a national day in honor of the men who were wrongly blamed and forgotten. They called it Truth and Honor Day, and at the center of that celebration stood Armand Singh, the man who had once been handcuffed and called a traitor. Now, he was being called something else. The hero who never gave up. The ceremony, a huge crowd gathered in the capital city. Flags waved in the wind. Army bands played proud music. When Armand walked onto the stage, people cheered his name. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Armand didn't speak right away. He just looked around quietly, at the faces full of hope, pride, and love. Then he said in his calm voice, "Years ago I was handcuffed in front of the world. But that day I promised myself, they can chain my hands, not my soul." The crowd went silent. Every word felt heavy and true. "I am not the only one," he continued. "There are many who were blamed, many who were silenced. If my story gives them courage to speak, then my pain was not wasted." People stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. Some soldiers saluted him. Some old women folded their hands in respect, and at that moment, the world saw the hero they had once doubted was now the man they would never forget. The offer after the ceremony, the Prime Minister personally met Armand. He said respectfully, "Captain Singh, your service and your sacrifice cannot be measured. We want you to return, to lead the next generation of soldiers." Armand smiled gently. "Sir, I'm grateful, but my time with the gun is over. I have fought enough battles. Now I want to build something." The Prime Minister looked curious. "What do you mean?" "I want to start a foundation," Armand said, "for the families of forgotten soldiers, for those who served silently and never got justice." The Prime Minister nodded with respect. "That will be your greatest victory, Captain." A new mission weeks later, Armand and Mira started the Truth Lives Foundation. They traveled from village to village, meeting families of fallen soldiers, helping them get the support they were promised. Mira recorded their stories and shared them online. The videos went viral again. People started donating to the foundation. One day, during one of their visits, a little boy came running toward Armand. "Uncle, my papa was a soldier too," he said proudly. "Everyone forgot him. But I didn't." Armand smiled and knelt down. "Then you are braver than many grown men, my boy." The boy gave him a small drawing. It showed a man in uniform standing under the sun. Below it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "The hero lives again." Armand looked at it for a long moment. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "Yes, the hero lives again, in every heart that remembers." The sun rose gently over the city. For the first time in many years, Captain Armand Singh woke up without fear, without guilt, and without chains. The noise of the sea outside his window felt peaceful now, like the sound of freedom itself. He stood there for a moment, watching the sunrise. His heart was calm, but his mind was full of memories. Memories of his soldiers, his lost friends, and the long road that had brought him here. He whispered softly, "It's over, but it will never be forgotten." A nation that finally remembered. In every corner of the country, people were still talking about Armand Singh. Children were learning his story in schools. TV shows were made about his bravery, and soldiers across the borders saluted his name again. The government announced a national day in honor of the men who were wrongly blamed and forgotten. They called it Truth and Honor Day, and at the center of that celebration stood Armand Singh, the man who had once been handcuffed and called a traitor. Now, he was being called something else, the hero who never gave up. The ceremony, a huge crowd gathered in the capital city. Flags waved in the wind. Army bands played proud music. When Armand walked onto the stage, people cheered his name. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but Armand didn't speak right away. He just looked around quietly, at the faces full of hope, pride, and love. Then he said in his calm voice, "Years ago I was handcuffed in front of the world. But that day I promised myself, they can chain my hands, not my soul." The crowd went silent. Every word felt heavy and true. "I am not the only one," he continued. "There are many who were blamed, many who were silenced. If my story gives them courage to speak, then my pain was not wasted." People stood up, clapping with tears in their eyes. Some soldiers saluted him. Some old women folded their hands in respect. And at that moment, the world saw the hero they had once doubted was now the man they would never forget. The offer after the ceremony, the Prime Minister personally met Armand. He said respectfully, "Captain Singh, your service and your sacrifice cannot be measured. We want you to return, to lead the next generation of soldiers." Armand smiled gently. "Sir, I'm grateful, but my time with the gun is over. I have fought enough battles. Now I want to build something." The Prime Minister looked curious. "What do you mean?" "I want to start a foundation," Armand said, "for the families of forgotten soldiers, for those who served silently and never got justice." The Prime Minister nodded with respect. "That will be your greatest victory, Captain." A new mission weeks later, Armand and Mira started the Truth Lives Foundation. They traveled from village to village, meeting families of fallen soldiers, helping them get the support they were promised. Mira recorded their stories and shared them online. The videos went viral again. People started donating to the foundation. One day during one of their visits, a little boy came running toward Armand. "Uncle, my papa was a soldier too," he said proudly. "Everyone forgot him." "But I didn't," Armand smiled and knelt down. "Then you are braver than many grown men, my boy." The boy gave him a small drawing. It showed a man in uniform standing under the sun. Below it, in a child's handwriting, were the words, "The hero lives again." Armand looked at it for a long moment. Tears filled his eyes. He whispered, "Yes. The hero lives again, in every heart that remembers. The shadows return, but peace never lasts forever." One evening, Mira came to Armand with a serious face. "Captain, I found something," she said. "There are still people inside the system covering up more corruption. Mehta and Rao were not the only ones." Armand took a deep breath. He had expected this. "Then our mission isn't over," he said quietly. "We don't fight with guns now. We fight with truth," Mira smiled. "And truth doesn't need bullets." Armand nodded. "Exactly. Truth itself is a weapon." Together they decided to expose the remaining names. But this time the whole nation stood behind them. They were not just two voices anymore, they were a movement. The broadcast months later, Mira hosted a national TV program called The Forgotten Ones. Armand was her first guest. Millions of people watched as he told stories, not of anger, but of hope. "You see," he said on live television, "a soldier doesn't fight for medals or fame. He fights so others can sleep in peace. But when the same nation calls him a traitor, that pain is worse than any wound." He paused, his eyes calm but emotional. "I forgave those who wronged me, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace." The studio went silent. Even the cameramen had tears in their eyes. Mira whispered, "You've taught us more than history ever could, Captain." He smiled softly. "No, Mira. I just reminded people that heroes are not born. They are made by truth." The last scene years passed. Armand grew older, but his spirit remained strong. His foundation expanded to every corner of the country. Thousands of families were helped. His story became part of school books, and his name was spoken with pride. One morning he went back to the same sea where it all began. He sat on the same bench watching the sunrise once more. A young soldier came up to him and saluted. "Sir, I joined the army because of you," he said. "Your story gave me courage," Armand smiled. "Then my story has done its job." He stood up slowly, his eyes still bright, and saluted the rising sun. The camera zoomed in on his face, and peaceful, strong, eternal. His voice echoed softly. "They handcuffed my hands, but they could never chain my soul, because truth always finds its freedom." The screen slowly faded to black, and the final words appeared on screen. "The hero lives again, not in uniform, but in every heart that believes in truth."